We'd like to call the meeting of the Abington Board of Selectmen to order. Could you kindly rise to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm obligated under the state statute to mention that Selectman Kevin Damasio is joining us through Zoom, and with his permission, he's asked that I announce that he has problems with his back. He's waiting for a date to go in for an operation, so he will be joining us by Zoom for probably the foreseeable future until his medical issue is cleared up. And I say that, again, with his permission. Which, as a result, any votes we take will be taken by roll call in accordance with the state statute. We have with us tonight all representations of government. We have the federal, state, and county. So we're very happy to have everybody here. Before we get involved in that, I just want to ask if there is any public announcements or public comments. Mr. Collins.
Rick Collins, 74 Orange Street, Chairman of the Charter Review Committee. And I know the board is aware that the Charter Review is finishing up their 18-month review of the town's charter. I want to make sure people at home are aware as well. Again, we spent the last 18 months reviewing the town charter line by line, seeing if there's anywhere we need to improve to make the town's government run a bit better. We are offering up a number of amendments to it. None affect the major form of the town's government, but there's enough minor to moderate things in there that I think it's worth people paying some attention to. So the text of every change we're proposing is currently on the town website. If they go to the town website, they look up Charter Review Committee. On the left-hand side is a text of every charter change that we're proposing. It has the before language, the after language, the reasons we're changing it, affected sections, and all of this is so that we can have a public hearing on Thursday night at 6 p.m. here in the Buckley Room, where people can come and ask questions, get more information. We don't want them to go into town meeting on the 1st and say, well, what's all this? So all our meetings have been recorded and are online. And we're also happy to answer any questions anybody may have. They can email us at charterreview@abingtonma.gov. So I don't know if there's any questions you might have right now. Happy to come in for a full presentation in the near future. But in the meantime, just want to get that on people's radar that we have a big hearing coming up on this Thursday.
Very good. Thanks very much. Before we get rolling, are there any announcements from the members of the Board of Selectmen?
No announcements.
No, sir.
Okay, great. As I indicated before, I'll just by way of introduction, we have with us this evening Congressman Stephen Lynch, as well as State Representative Allison Sullivan, Almeida, and Senator Keenan just arrived as well. And we have with us two of the county commissioners, Jared Valenzola, the chairman, and Greg Hanley, who has just moved to Abington, I understand, and our county treasurer, Tom O'Brien. What I'm going to do, as protocol dictates, I'll ask the congressman to come up first, but I do want to say to the treasurer, since I was formerly a county commissioner and chairman of the county commissioners, we have this thing where it's once a commissioner, always a commissioner, so they're going to go before you, if you don't mind. So,
That makes sense to me.
so with that, Congressman, we'd be happy to hear from you.
If I could, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the members of the board. We did this as a team,
Yeah.
and I was hoping that we might
Sure.
come to the podium. and
Oh,
name all
absolutely.
The state and county.
Absolutely,
officials.
whatever you like.
I think that would be great.
We'll have everybody up here then.
Thank you.
Senator and Representative, if you could join.
Very, very much. So as you may remember, Congress passed the American Rescue Plan Act, and the idea was to, post-pandemic, to really give towns the ability to recoup some of the tax money that was not collected because of the lack of economic activity during the pandemic. So towns had the ability, as the Board of Selectmen has chosen, to choose projects that they felt were of high priority and of enormous impact on the communities and the people in which these monies have been spent. So this particular grant was for $500,000, was for $500,000, but I noticed they took some taxes out because you only got $493,160.50. An equal amount went to the town of Rockland, and it is because of the joint water treatment compact between the town of Abington and the town of Rockland. So my colleague, Bill Keating, Congressman Bill Keating, was able to do a similar amount in Rockland. But I have to say, this is one of the best uses of the federal resources. I have 18 towns and 3 cities. And also I'm part of the New England delegation. So we're sort of involved in all of those grants for all those cities and towns and states of New England. This is probably one of the best that I've seen in terms of impacting people in a positive way. And what you have chosen to do in representing the town of Abington is to impact something that's important to every single man, woman, and child in the town, and that is to clean up the drinking water here. PFAS has been a scourge. I have probably a dozen towns in my district that are grappling with this, but you have done something about it. So this $500,000, well, just short of $500,000, is being used to put in a filtration system that will actually remove, and there are several different technologies that are available, but you have chosen the best, because it's a little bit more expensive, but it removes 100% of the PFAS. Somebody help me, something.
Fluorides, yeah.
They're forever chemicals that are in the water that we have a very difficult time removing. And so this system uses a resin that actually, and the resin is positively charged, ionic, and anionic, that's what it's called, and it actually acts like a magnet. It sucks the PFAS out of the water system and really does an amazing job. There are several different technologies, but this is the one that gets 100% of it. So I just want to congratulate you. I think it's a great use of federal resources. I do want to say we work as a partnership. So when we knew this money was coming out and we had approved it, the idea was some of the money went directly to the state for the governor's discretion. But we also knew that nobody knows the needs of each town better than the Board of Selectmen, and in some cases, the local mayor. So a huge amount of the resources, the federal resources, was dedicated towards individual towns and cities, because we felt, sitting in Washington, there were states that took COVID very seriously. There were other states that did not take it seriously enough. And so we just left it up to the states and the towns and the cities to make that decision on what they thought was important. But I just want to congratulate you. I also want to thank my colleagues at the state and county government, too. We worked very, very closely with Senator Keenan and Representative Sullivan. They were the ones that came to us and said, you know, we think we have the perfect project that would fit the description of the grant program. And then we also met with the Plymouth County Treasurer, Tom O'Brien, a dear friend and an old colleague from the State House, and also the members, Greg Hanley, and the members of the Plymouth County Commissioners. So it was unanimous support. In our case, in Plymouth County, in some areas, the state handles the grants, but Plymouth County took the bull by the horns, so to speak, and they made sure that the individual towns had a voice in this. And that's to Tom O'Brien's credit, and he was the key administrator in moving this money around and making sure that it got to the right places. And he was backed up ably by all of the members of the Plymouth County Commissioners, Greg Hanley, and others. So very grateful for, this is really a team approach here, and it only worked as well as it did because we all worked together as one team. And, I take great pride in that. Whether it was a Republican representative or a Democratic senator, we came together in the best interest of the people of Abington. And I just think the people will, and with your guidance as well, I think the people of Abington were well served by this allocation of federal money. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Congressman. I think, obviously, the board has appreciated your support on a number of efforts that we've turned to you for, and you've been most helpful to the town, as has Senator Keenan, Representative Sullivan Almeida, and the county commissioners, too, and, of course, my good friend Tom O'Brien from way back when. So we're most grateful, for your efforts and to come today to give us the money, obviously, because this year's going to be a little bit thin, as we all know, and it's the peaks and valleys come and go as they do, as those of us who have been involved in this business long enough understand. So we're most thankful for it, and again, I can't thank all of you enough, because anytime we've had an issue that we called on, you have not hesitated whatsoever, and you've all came through, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. Anybody else like to? Jared?
Well, that was up to you, Treasurer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Jared Valenzola, Chairman of the Board of County Commissioners. It is always a privilege as a lifelong Rocklandite to be able to come to Abington, although I was told by the board that I'm only allowed into Abington so long as we're bringing big checks.
Right.
We'll keep the Bulldogs and Green Wave rivalry on the football field in Gridiron. It is always a privilege and pleasure to follow Congressman Lynch. I can speak on behalf of Commissioner Wright, and we'll have Commissioner Hanley say a few words as well as the treasurer. Back when CARES Act was being allocated, some may recall that there was some controversy regarding Plymouth County's administration of that program. The previous administration demanded that Plymouth County return the $90 million that was allocated to Plymouth County to the state for their administration. Long story short, it's been a while since we've been before you folks to offer an update. In the final analysis of the Plymouth County CARES program, each and every town in Plymouth County received 50% more dollars than like-sized communities outside Plymouth County. Put that into perspective, the city of Brockton received $19 million. New Bedford received $8 million. The city of Brockton received the second most CARES Act money in the Commonwealth, only behind the city of Boston, who had their own allocation. That was due in large part to the work and wisdom of my colleagues, again, Commissioner Wright, Commissioner Hanley, as well as Treasurer O'Brien. We delivered that at the lowest administrative cost in the nation, less than 1%, which again meant more money for Abington, and we did it more quickly than the Commonwealth. So what's the old expression? Good, quick, and cheap, you can get 2 out of 3. With Plymouth County, we managed to deliver 3 out of 3. So again, I want to really thank Congressman Lynch for continuing to fight for Plymouth County and the existing counties still left in Massachusetts to administer these funds, because it has meant more money for our member communities. We've now pivoted to ARPA, where we've been able to continue that excellent work. The national average for administration of ARPA right now is currently running 7 to 10%. We're currently running at 1%, Treasurer O'Brien. Now, of course, you can see he's got a little bandage on his ear. That's because we're really running him ragged, keeping that down to 1%, and we're very grateful for his work. And again, the Congressman covered it perfectly. Republican, Democrat, federal, state, county, we all work well collaboratively together. We're grateful for his advocacy, grateful for the advocacy of Senator Keenan, Representative Sullivan Almeida. We're incredibly grateful for their partnership and their friendship. One of the things that I think is important, again, I quip, I'm from Rockland, but I am from Rockland. I'm one town over. Commissioner Hanley loves Abington so much, he's moved to Abington. We're local. We represent the same constituents. We work for the same people, which is the people of Abington, and we're here to help and serve you. So I will hand it off to my colleague and friend, Commissioner Hanley, to say a few words, and then I think we'll go down the line real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. What can I say that hasn't been already said? From this vantage point, I have the opportunity to review 27 communities' use of funds. And as the Congressman spoke of earlier, this is the most judicious use of the money for the best bang for the buck of the taxpayer of the town of Abington. This money allows you not to have to borrow money. And hopefully we've leveraged this money with the Clean Water Trust for other PFAS needs. This is an opportunity for you to not hit everyone in the pocket, especially when we're looking at 9C cuts from the Commonwealth. So I want to echo the sentiments that we couldn't do it alone. At this point, I'd like to invite up the senator and the rep, because without their support, there would be no opportunities for us. CARES was something that, as my chair had spoke of, was not well received by the governor. If you look back to the period of April 27th, 2020 to May 1st, 2020, and plug in Plymouth County CARES, you'll see what kind of pressure was applied to the county. You'll see notices by the Inspector General's office that we didn't have the capability to administer the funds, and yet Congressman Lynch offered a resolution down in Congress to recognize Plymouth County as the lowest cost to administer for money given in the country. Fast forward 9 months later, you have the Massachusetts House of Representatives quarantining the balance of the money for CARES from the governor. So with that, I want to thank my colleagues in the legislature, who I'd bring John and Ms. Sullivan and Amita up to say the rest, but from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for believing in us, and thank you for applying it to now my tax bill here in the town of Abington. So thank you.
Very good, thank you, Greg. John?
I think you guys have heard, I think, enough politicians speaking as far as that goes. But I do want to thank the congressman for the hard work you did as far as getting the money to us and our county government. I know we got a little bit of pushback, I believe the senator as well, up at the State House, as far as getting the money here. Of course, the state wanted the money because they wanted to spend it how they wanted, and they would have forgot about Abington. And thankfully, we have a county government that is intact, that is willing to work hard on our behalf. And Abington saw a lot more dollars than they would have if the state had control of it. So I appreciate all your hard work, the treasurer as well, and thank you all to you guys as well. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Everything that's been said, I agree with 100%. I want to thank my colleagues in government, Congressman Lynch, for making the effort to appropriate the money, then making sure that it got here to the local level, the county commissioners, the treasurer, my colleague in the legislature, and then also to you for using it wisely. And we are able at the various levels of government to appropriate funds, and you always worry a little bit, will they be properly used? And we've never had that concern here in Abington, and this is further proof of that. So thank you all.
Very good. Thomas?
And as promised, last but not least, we hope, let me apologize first for not having a tie on. I had some surgery on my ear. It wasn't, as Commissioner Valenzuela said, them working me to the bone. But I do apologize for that. So when we do a photo op, I'll exclude myself from that, so it's a much better looking group. But I did want to begin by complimenting the team here in Abington. You got to hear a lot about our team, but I want the Board of Selectmen to know, those that are watching and participating remotely and from home, what a great team you have, starting with Scott and the folks in his office, the different department heads that you have working for you and with you every day and on behalf of your residents. As was mentioned, we have the pleasure of working with 27 communities. Not all of them bring the resources to bear to accomplish the tasks necessary to receive these funds in a timely fashion in the way that you want them. But Scott at the helm and with the rest of the team, you folks do a great job working with our team to make sure the applications are done properly, that the review is done properly. When we have an audit question, that there isn't any pushback, let us get the answer. It's frustrating when we're trying to hand out money to communities and we ask for a document. They say, well, why do you need the document? That really shouldn't be the question. It should be, how quickly can we get you that document? And that's the answer we get here in Abington. I also must report that while you certainly have esteemed residents, ranging from Commissioner Hanley to others here in the town of Abington, it's important to note that the deputy treasurer in my office, Jeff Welch, is also a resident of Abington. So you've got it covered from the executive branch to the treasurer's office. So if anyone in Abington ever doubts that Abington is first and foremost, not just alphabetically, in the hearts of Plymouth County, you know that we have some residents that make sure Abington remains at the forefront for us. And then finally, as a matter of personal privilege, I just am thrilled that Congressman Lynch is able to come to these. He's got an incredible schedule that we all know between here and Washington, D.C. But whenever we have an issue, whenever we have a challenge, he is our go-to person on Capitol Hill. And he's our go-to person because he's there when we need him. He responds quickly, he gets it. the lesson he gave us on PFAS was fascinating to me, because you know he does his homework, and he's involved and engaged. And when we have issues, whether it's with the CARES Act and with ARPA, he knows that we're a resource because we can get the money out to you faster. Just one little aside about CARES, you heard how we administered at the lowest cost in the country, but what you didn't hear is we were the first governmental entity to spend every single penny. Not every single dollar, every single penny. And we were the first one to be able to report back that we weren't turning a single penny back to the U.S. Treasury. That's first in the entire country, right here in Little Plymouth County. And that's a tribute to the group that we have together. It's a tribute to the bipartisanship that we have, the friendship that we share, and how hard we all collectively work for our constituents. So thank you. I'm hoping we can do a quick photo op, but I didn't know if the town wanted to add anything. I will tell you this is not our last check. You have a couple more in the pipeline. So we hope to be back bringing even more resources to the town of Abington.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much again for everything. What you wanted to do, a picture? Or-
If we could, if
Sure.
it's all right with the
Yeah,
board.
yeah,
We do have the big check. We don't want
All
that to
right.
go to waste.
Who do you want? You want to get up?
We took the time to write the town of Abington in. I'm not going to be in this one. Okay. I have my ears are shut. You can't even tell. I always look like a cat out of here. All right. If the congressman insists.
All right.
Where's the best place? You don't do this all the time?
No.
No?
So I bought this green suit specifically for
Stand behind you, I'll just one.
It does. Hold it. I want to be on the other side.
The treasurer has a good.
You're almost on cable TV if you want to wave to the camera.
Right. Very good. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again. Very good. Thank you. What thing? Yeah. Go ahead. More importantly, there's the rail check.
Yeah, I handed the real check over.
Jared, do you need directions back to Rockland now?
I'll find out. I really might send the police.
No, we have the police out there to escort you, yeah.
Congressman Lynch. Hey, John Keenan. If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say something on behalf of some of the residents of Abington.
Sure.
Sean, he's waved him in.
Oh, great.
Waved him in for
Congressman
you,
Lynch,
Sean.
and everyone who was up here, as a resident of Abington, I'm involved in a lot of different extracurricular activities, and I've been working with our town manager, Scott Lambiase, and the Board of Selectmen on how to implement and expend the ARPA funds, how to invest it. For years, we've been hearing about infrastructure, and it was never there, never happened, and finally, federal money coming into Abington. And you brought up a huge investment in our water problem here in Abington, which is really an issue for a lot of people in Abington and Rockland. So we thank you for the American Rescue Plan money investment. But I wanted to also thank you on behalf of the kids in this town. Because Scott wanted to do some things in this town that were visible, that people would notice and see the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan investment. So some of the things we did, if you're not aware, when you came down Glenowitz Way, there's a new guardrail there for safety because of all the kids that are around the school areas. So that we would not have been able to afford as a town. So that we put in. The speeding signs on two of our main streets that ask people to slow down near one of the schools particularly, that is an ARPA project. Dear to my heart is we were able to renovate our varsity baseball field. We were able to renovate our varsity softball field. We were able to buy a new football scoreboard to replace the 30-plus-year-old scoreboard and a new softball scoreboard for the team that won the state championship 3 years ago. We didn't have the money to put a sign on their scoreboard because their scoreboard didn't work. Now we have a scoreboard and it's going to say state champions on there. Those kids are all going to see that. They're all going to be proud to be there. They're going to be in a safer place to play, a safer place to go to school. And it's all because of the work of Congressman Lynch. Particularly, I want to thank you because I know you take a lot of time to be here, and all of our state representatives and state senators in the county. Again, on behalf of the kids of Abington, the families of Abington, just thanks for the investment. It pays dividends for years, so thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Just before we call the legislators up, and just before you leave, Tom, we do have one item that vote to transfer OPEB funds to Plymouth County OPEB Trust. We have before us a vote, the town manager can explain it briefly, and then we can consider it and take a vote. So,
Yeah, so, as you're aware, we do have OPEB liability, we currently, our liability is probably in the $70+ million range. We currently have about $300,000 that we'd like to put into and invest, and we want to give them, put them into this Plymouth County OPEB Trust Fund to invest them for us. And as time goes by, we'll start paying into this a lot more like we do currently with our retirement fund, and make sure that we get caught up on this.
And this is something under the provisions of law, obviously, and I've discussed this with the treasurer as well, and it's your recommendation that we adopt this agreement. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, the question comes as a vote of the Board of Selectmen authorizing participation in the Plymouth County OPEB Trust Program. It's a delineation of the document that'll be made part of the minutes. Is there any discussion from the board? If not, I'll accept a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Motion made, is there a second?
A second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, by roll call vote, Mr. Damasio?
Yes.
Ms. DeJustburg?
Yes.
Mr. Chapin?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Thank you very much. We're all set, we'll all sign that. And again, thank you very much to everybody. We appreciate it, all your help and assistance. You're welcome to stay if you like. We're going to bring the legislators up, but I know you've got, on to the next function. So, very good. Thank you, Congressman. We have with us, as we indicated previously, Senator Keenan and Representative Ellison Sullivan Almeida to discuss with us the legislative update, and more importantly, as we've all discussed previously, the governor's budget as it relates to local aid, which, as I alluded to previously, we go through peaks and valleys, and, the pendulum swings. The question is, you got to know when to duck, as we used to say. So we'd be happy to hear from you, and then we can have a discussion.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having us here today. I'm happy that we both were able to make it to give somewhat of an update as far as the legislative body goes. As far as the budget, we know that it's a $56.1 billion budget that we're over here playing with on the House side now. And then it'll go over to the Senate, and then, as you know, it'll be a huge process, and hopefully we'll get it signed by end of July. That's the hope and promise, right? And as you're aware, and all jokes aside, is we had a 9C cuts, and that was devastating for our communities. It was very frustrating, especially for me and the senators, the very lack of transparency that came with it. We were found out moments before you found out, and my first phone calls were to you. And it was very frustrating, because how do we get half a van for our seniors? How do we get half a roof for, our veterans? And it's frustrating, especially from somebody like myself and the senator who represent and who go to, bat for our communities that we represent, as far as these, very minor dollars in the grand scheme of a $56 billion budget for our local communities to offset that cost for our local towns. And it was disheartening to hear. We heard, in January, and we get a budget passed in July, and to think that we're going to get these projects accomplished, and then to find quickly out that no, or there's going to be some time that takes to get those projects accomplished is very frustrating, especially on my end, I believe for the senator as well. So the hope is we don't have another 9C cut, but unfortunately, with the governor's capability, that's where she's able to cut, is from our 9C amendments. And our 9C amendments are to our local communities. It's our local senior centers, our local veterans organizations, our local fire departments, our local police departments. In the past, I've gotten funding for both our fire and our police, our veterans and our seniors, along with Senator Keenan here in Abington. And it's very fearful on my end as we go into this budget debate and budget discussion, because we're still in the very beginnings of it. We're having hearings across the Commonwealth and these listening tours to what the budget may look like when it comes to the House floor in April. And it's scary to think when I come to Scott and ask Scott what his top 3 requests are. What are those key items that might be helpful here in Abington? What does that money look like? I have a hard time saying to Scott, okay, we're going to get it, or at least we may get it, and not feel as though we might be disappointed again in January. The way the budget's looking is we're down on revenue. It's a very scary situation that we're in as far as the local 9C earmarks. So I just want to keep that in mind as we go forward in this discussion around local ask. And I come to you every year around this time, and we have those discussions. So if you can keep in mind of what you may want to have accomplished, but may be able to go without, that's where we're at as far as our budget discussion. I don't know if the senator wants to speak on that as well, a few words.
Sure. Thank you, Representative. Good evening, everybody. It's great to be here. I wish we could bring as big a check as what the county brought from the federal government. I thought what I'd do is just to give you a quick update on where we are in the current fiscal year and what we're expecting for the next fiscal year. In terms of process, usually in December, the Joint Committee on Ways and Means, the House and Senate Committee on Ways and Means meets and brings together a group of experts that work to bring forward their thoughts, their ideas, what their analysis is, the data that backs it up, as to what the Commonwealth can expect for revenue in the upcoming fiscal year. That process usually takes place in December. And as a result of that process, the House, the Senate, and the executive branch usually come up with what they call a consensus revenue figure. How much money will the state have to spend on the upcoming budget? That process occurred this year. There was a lot of uncertainty about where it would lead, but there was nonetheless a projection that there would be growth. At the time the consensus revenue hearing was occurring, we were getting news for the fifth, nearly 6 months in a row, that our revenues for the current fiscal year were not meeting expectations. We're not meeting the benchmarks that had been established. 6 months into the current fiscal year, we're in fiscal year 24, 6 months into the fiscal year, we were somewhere between $600 and $700 million in deficit. So as a result of that, there was an adjustment. There were 9 seat cuts, as the representative talked about, which the governor can exercise unilaterally, go in and basically make cuts in the budget to try to bring things in balance, because we are required constitutionally to have a balanced budget. So that occurred. And then there was reestablishment of what our expected revenues were going to be for the balance of the fiscal year. So the original expectation was established, and then in December, January, those expectations were lowered in conjunction with the governor's 9 seat cuts. We are at the point now nearing the end of February, where in January and for the first half of February, revenues did not meet those lowered expectations. And so we continue to struggle as we make our way through fiscal year 2024. As they were trying to establish a revenue figure for next year, and this is not a local aid consensus number, but a revenue figure for next year, they came to the position where they would be somewhere about $200 million less than what they had anticipated, based on everything that had been provided. So that was adjusted. And again, since that occurring, in terms of now looking into fiscal year 2025, the numbers haven't gotten any better. So we're in a situation where we have to balance the current fiscal year budget and then prepare a budget for fiscal year 2025 with uncertainty as to where we are, as to how much money the Commonwealth will have to spend. Normally by this time, in addition to having a consensus revenue figure, there would be an agreement between the governor, the House, and the Senate on what the local aid figures would be, Chapter 70 and unrestricted general government aid. That has not occurred because of the uncertainty. And that uncertainty, unfortunately and regrettably, comes down to the local level where you await the numbers. I remember when I worked as chief of staff in the mayor's office in Quincy, I kept a spreadsheet as to every time there was any sort of news on local revenues, and you just waited and waited and waited. And I know that occurs in this town because you do things in a very fiscally responsible manner, and you're waiting, and you just don't know, and we just don't know at this stage as to what to expect for fiscal year 2025. I think I can speak on behalf of the representative that the top priority for us always is to make sure that there's as much local aid funding made available to the communities as possible. And I think that every senator, when we go in, we meet with the Ways and Means Committee, and probably every representative, when they meet with the House Ways and Means, goes in and says, hey, first priority, local aid, because that does mean police, fire, schools, libraries, all the things that are so important here at the local level. So that's, the goal is to continue to have an increase in local aid. The governor's budget that she filed does show a local aid increase for the town of Abington. Whether that holds or changes, we don't know, but we're going to advocate that we at least maintain local aid as what it is, meaning what's been presented by the governor, and hopefully we can do better, but I don't really believe that we're going to be able to do much better than what the governor has conveyed. And I think the governor's number results in an increase of about, I had the figure, I thought, just about $300-something thousand for, $316,615 for the town. That is less than the historical average over the last 5 years, but nonetheless, it is an increase. We want to make sure that that increase stays, and we'll be working very hard to ensure that. So the question then comes, what about using the state's rainy day fund or a stabilization fund? Is that a way that we can supplement what we want to do with various accounts? What I'm hearing through the Ways and Means Committee is there's a real hesitancy to do that, despite the fact that we have about an $8 billion stabilization fund, one of the best that we've had ever, I believe. And what we're hearing from the rating agencies, the bond rating agencies, is that even though things are tight here now, it's not raining. The national economy seems to be doing pretty well. The state economy is doing okay. It just hasn't translated into revenues for the Commonwealth. And so if we were to use rainy day funds, stabilization funds, to plug the holes in the current year budget or in the upcoming year's budget, the bond rating agencies would not look favorably on that. And you might say, well, does that really matter? It does matter, because our bond rating impacts how much we can do through our bond authorizations. We have a housing bond authorization before us. We have infrastructure bond authorizations that are likely to come. We do transportation, all those types of things that we bond. Chapter 90, which we bond. All of those expenditures are bonded, and the rate of interest that we pay on those bonds determines how much work we can get done with the money that we allocate. So it's really a period of time where we're still sorting things out. We're optimistic that this isn't a long-term structural problem for the Commonwealth, that it's just something that we'll have to get through as we close out fiscal '24, go into fiscal '25, and maybe a lag into fiscal year '26, but we're really not certain. But I think I can speak for both of us, that we will do everything we can to make sure that local aid is as high as it possibly can, because we know you need that money, and we know that it's always spent wisely here in Abington.
Thank you. I'm glad you addressed the issue of the stabilization fund, because that was going to be one of my questions, in that, because it is sitting at $8 billion, and, you know, clearly, I know, if I remember correctly, several years ago, when there was a dip, and we had probably a similar situation whereby the governor had proposed local aid numbers, they didn't materialize. The legislature then came in and did take money out of the stabilization. And I know both of you have been very helpful to the town, and I know clearly you understand our dilemma as we're trying to craft the budget, because we're not the only one. You have other towns, too, that are indicating the same thing. So I would just leave, from as far as I'm concerned, with the last comment would be, I get the whole bond rating issue, but I think depending, if there is something coming forward, if it's not, you know, even if it's just a little hit to the fund, or diverting monies that ordinarily would have gone into the stabilization fund by statute, if that could be directed to the local aid account, that may be an issue of compromise where you're not touching the balance, but the funds that statutorily would have been diverted, it may be something to consider. Just, I throw that out there.
That has been a topic of discussion.
Okay, great, very good. Well, again, you know, I really appreciate, I get you understand our problem, but, you know, it's a yearly dance we all have to do, and unfortunately, when the economy takes a dip a little bit, these are the dilemmas we're faced with. Any members of the board have any questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you very
Damasio,
much.
any question? Nope, I guess not. All right. Well, again, thank you very much again for all your help, and if you could just take back our concerns, we would appreciate it.
Of course, definitely.
Very good.
Thank you, and as you know, I'm always available, I know the
Yes.
senators as well. Questions do arise, feel free to either call, email, text, whatever, and I know constituents also know we have office hours every month at the COA, so if anyone does have questions that want to come to the COA and have those discussions with us, it's either myself and Catherine, or Catherine's always there as well, and sometimes baby Alina will be with me, so you might get a little peek at the new addition to the 7th Plymouth District, but And again, thank you so much for all you do. Kevin, if you're there, I hope you're feeling better. Good luck on your surgery, but we'll be in active conversations.
Very good. Well, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Superintendent Tom Hickey from South Shore VOTEC, if you would kindly come up. And I think the presentation we were looking for tonight is really on the school. You know, we understand your budget, and that is something you're going to have to work through with the town manager. But in terms of the question as it relates to the new school proposal, if you could kindly run us through that, and then we can have a little discussion, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm also here tonight with your representative to our Regional School Committee, Tom Petrozelli.
Yes.
So,
How are you, Tom?
thanks to the tech team for putting this on the screen as well for tonight. So this is, in the last few weeks, we've been fortunate to come here to Abington now 3 times in the last month. We had a forum. We also were able to address FinCom, and we're happy that you'd give us a little time to update you. So the slides I have tonight give you information up to, as of late last week, where things stand with the project. What you see on the cover slide here is a picture of the preferred design that the building committee voted last Thursday night. And there are other pictures to orient you. For those of you familiar with our school, the Webster Street Route 123 would be at the bottom of the slide, and this new construction would be at the back. Thanks. So there you go. Could you go to the first slide again, please? Thank you. And now to the next one. This is a timeline. It's a busy slide, but it essentially walks through what our homework assignments are for calendar 24. So we voted the preferred schematic report, we picked a design, and we picked a target enrollment of 900 students. We'll meet with the MSBA on a few occasions in calendar 24, their facilities assessment subcommittee, then with the board in April to talk about the preferred schematic report. Hopefully we'll have a construction manager on board who will assist us with the feasibility process in the spring, and we enter a 6-month schematic design phase. When we get into late 2024, we will hopefully be in front of the MSBA board. If we meet all those milestones, that we would get their approval in October, and ultimately this would be something we would put in front of voters in January of 25. And from there, we would move into the project with design, construction, and potentially an opening for the 28-29 school year. So that's the rough edges. Next slide, please. In a parallel track, we're also working to bring our communities a potential amendment to our regional agreement, which would adjust how we apportion debt. From the time that the building was opened and chartered in 1960, the regional agreement says that debt is fixed at the time of the authorization. And recognizing that 30 years is a long time and enrollments do fluctuate, we would intend to bring to our communities an amendment that would change that formula and instead move it to a 4-year rolling average. That's something that we would bring to you hopefully for the fall. But we have a regional planning subcommittee that's looking at it, and we'll be sharing updates as we get closer. But this is not a spring town meeting article, and I certainly have more to say on that as we get deeper into the calendar year. In addition, as you may know, we are welcoming in the town of Marshfield as our 9th community. They'll start enrolling 9th graders this fall, but we're also in active conversations with the town of Pembroke. Again, that is a matter for our residents of our respective town meetings to vote on, which would also be in the form of a regional agreement amendment. So there's potential there, and I'll have more to report on that in the near future. Next slide, thank you. Again, here's another picture of the proposed school, which would be built, if you're familiar with our school, it's the ball fields in the back of the property. It'll be on 3 floors. The athletic fields would be moved to the front, if you will, closer to the road. The hallmark of this proposal here is that we'll be able to add 2 brand-new programs, plumbing and veterinary science. We see these as 2 programs in great demand, local and regional labor market. The veterinary science offers children in northern Plymouth County an opportunity to access a program that might historically only be offered at an agricultural school, and we think that there's merit to looking into that further. The next slide, thank you, will show you just a quick bird's eye view. So, yep, if you're watching the football game on this new field, that's, one back, please, thank you. That's just a bird's eye view of the school from Webster Street, what it would look like at that level. And then the following slide is just, again, to reorient. Webster is now at the top of the slide. It's just another schematic view of where the fields would be. A multi-purpose field with a track, a baseball field, and a softball field, which we would be using the outfields of those fields for off-season practices. Thanks. Next slide. The next several slides, just quick orientation to the floors. You'd have a first floor here, so the top of the slide is facing out towards Webster. Everything in pink would be shops. These are shops that need high ceilings, and the purple area would be a small, what the designers are calling a multi-purpose auditorium, which would have seats that would potentially hold half the school. We could retract those seats so that we're making more use of the space during the school year, during the school day. The beige area to the left of the auditorium is would be a dining commons area, and then the lighter green on the far left would be the bottom. Our gymnasium would stack on the second floor, so those would be locker room areas. What I like about the design is that it makes significant security improvements, along with many other improvements, but I like the fact that in this design, it won't jump off the page, but our main office, our salon, and our restaurant will have a single unified entrance, which will allow us to help better control for traffic. Otherwise, what you see here are shops that are going to be right-sized based on demand. The next two floors get a bit more traditional in terms of second floor, you'll have 3 vocational programs that don't require high ceilings: computer info tech, allied health, design, visual communications, and then you start to feather in some of our academic classrooms and our science labs, and then we have a partial third floor, which will include our electrical shop, which does need a high ceiling, but by putting it on the third floor, we can accomplish that, as well as some classrooms as well. So that's the design that we looked at reno designs, we looked at other new designs. We considered the 52-month-long reno process, the considerable amount of money spent on items that are not reimbursable, $20 million of modular construction, and this is, and we gave it an extra month to really kick the tires on it, and this is where we ended up. The next few slides get into some of the financials. It is very early. I've been cautioned by our project team. I've said this in many forums. My feeling as someone who lives in the district as well is that you can talk big numbers, but until you can orient people to household numbers, even if there's a wide margin of error, and even if we've got 10 months to go, it does make it less abstract, and it does evoke a reaction, as it should. So what we're trying to do is be as transparent as we can, and run the risk occasionally of, if things adjust as we go through schematic design, we'll provide updates. But this is what our building committee looked at, and the gray column is the other enrollment number that we looked at. And what this chart basically says is that our project team came back and said, there's about a $2 million difference between building for 805 students and building for 900. And so the delta between the two was not significant enough to say that we shouldn't consider the higher enrollment. Now, I caution our school committee and our building committee, from my perspective as the person that's bringing forth budget recommendations, and will bring forth budget recommendations to staff this building, that we must not think that by building for the larger number, there is an automatic, oh yeah, we're going to staff it. If you build it, will they come? Well, not without the teachers they want, and not without the bus drivers and the custodians. So my caution is only that I think it's the right decision for right now, based on the parameters and the potential of comparative costs. But it may take us a while, because with each successive operating budget, we've got to have the staff in order to bring in the students. And that's up to our local communities on an annual basis to say, that won't work, or this might work. So for now, the construction cost, the way the chart reads, the construction cost, the total, add in about 25% of soft costs, backing out the actual MSBA reimbursement. Our eligible reimbursement rate for feasibility was around 55%, and vocational schools don't get a special reimbursement rate, unfortunately. We have a lot of expenses that are not, that go beyond the caps. So they're estimating an actual reimbursement rate of about 38%. So that's that lower right corner, that 176 million, which is the number that we'll be pushing out using to project, okay, based on certain parameters, how does this break down for each of our communities? Those costs won't be the costs when we get to the end of schematic design. They'll be much more precise, and it's my expectation that those numbers would only be going down. I've asked politely to our project team to let's move in one direction only, please. And if we've got to make some tough decisions, then we'll do that. The next slide takes it down even one level in more detail. Again, with the assumptions, if you bear with me, again, a very busy slide, better for reading afterwards, but this is a look only at the average assessed home in Abington, and asking there are a couple of parameters here. So the way I would orient you to this slide is, if you look at the 900s that are somewhat highlighted, you can see this is what the cost could be in the ballpark if we were operating without the town of Marshfield. And I'm making an educated guess that if over the next 4 years, Marshfield onboards about 20 students a year, we're going to be the same school for the next 4 years. So it's a solid denominator. We're about 670 kids. So I can make a projection that if they enroll 20 kids a year, which I think is probably conservative, they'd be about 12% of the district. So as we're still talking about a regional agreement amendment that would make it adjustable, it's very important that we talk also about what's your current thought process, what's the current projection. So in this chart, it says life with Marshfield at 20 kids a year, a baseline without. So you can see that 364 goes to 325. And that's using level principal. Now, how you borrow money comes later on, but we do want to be able to orient people to some of these numbers. I also want to share, for those who are interested in talking with our financial advisors from Unibank, what are the other assumptions we're using in this model? Because for folks like Scott, your financial teams, this is important stuff to talk about now. Fiscal 29 is tomorrow for some folks, right? So we also want to be talking in that same language. So we're using an interest rate of 3.75%, and we're assuming that we would be borrowing in phases. With an approved project, we would start with a bond anticipation note in fiscal 26. So that's about a $20 million bond anticipation note. We'd pay interest only, about 700 grand. Abington's share in that first year would be 16.7%. The next 3 fiscal years, we would onboard more of the borrowing, 60%, 90%, and it's in fiscal 29 where we would mop up the rest of the borrowing. So those numbers in the chart above, again, not looking to sugarcoat or try to put too much on the slide, but these are numbers assuming fiscal 29. But we'll get there eventually, but it's not something that is immediate. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. This just helps to capture where all of the communities are. I do want to point out that, as I said earlier, while these numbers are based on our current regional agreement, doing a 3-year, where'd you get these numbers? It's a 3-year look back on enrollment. Now, if it becomes an adjustable thing, as enrollment changes, a 4-year rolling average takes out some of the volatility. Marshfield is listed as a TBD. It's very important to point this out. The current model we have for Marshfield is they're going to be on a pay-as-you-go model, and ultimately they would do a 4-year look back like everybody else. That would be our intention to bring to you later this fall. Our current regional agreement says that they will be on a pay-as-you-go model until we are working on the fiscal 30 budget. If this regional agreement didn't change, they would eventually have a fixed debt share. But when we brought this amendment to our communities, we did not want to fix a debt share for Marshfield prematurely, because they don't have any enrollment history to compare with other communities. So there'll be more to be said on that regional agreement amendment, certainly, but that's just a reference for future conversations, if you'd like. Last slide, please. And the final slide is simply a summary, again, of what I had oriented you to earlier, the various meetings that we're going to have. And I'd be happy to answer questions as you see fit, and would welcome the opportunity to give you periodic updates as we make our way through the calendar year. Thank you.
If I could, Tom, several questions come to mind, and you and I have had discussions in regards to this. I guess the first thing, I do want to focus in on the enrollment aspect a little bit later, if I could. But
certainly.
Currently, I guess my concern, as I expressed to you previously, is that the committee had originally voted to do an aggregate vote of all the district towns.
Yes.
And I guess my only concern with that is that in the aggregate, let's just hypothetically say Abington would to vote no, but the other district towns vote yes, we're still on the hook for it.
Correct.
Okay. The second question is then it becomes the question of financing it. So if there were going to be 2 votes, that would present us a very serious dilemma in that In the aggregate, people, are looking at it, do you want to go for a new school? Well, I don't know what it costs, or maybe I do. I'm looking at it in a vacuum. And so then the question comes, Abington's share is whatever it turns out being, and I don't want to quote a number because you haven't finited it, but if we don't debt exclude that, then we're still on the hook for it. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is
Okay.
the same concept as our regional budget, but just much, much bigger.
Okay.
Absolutely right.
So I guess the question that I have, and obviously, I was a graduate of VOTEC, so I'm a huge advocate for vocational education, but in this particular case, I guess my concern is, based on the timeline that the committee has voted, that the aggregate vote, as I understood it, unless that has changed, was going to take place in January of '25. Is that still the case?
That is tentatively the case, Mr. Chair. That's actually something that we would be leaning on our town clerk. So we wouldn't have any authority to name that date. Whatever estimates we do and present to you later in this calendar year, it'll be based on that, but that is not something that is, unlike the MSBA milestones, that is not something that is set in stone.
Okay, what I would suggest, basically through the town manager then, is maybe the town managers get together with the clerks, and I'm concerned with a January vote, for the very reason, the weather. And the fact that if it's a one-issue thing in the middle of January, I think, in my estimation, it would be far more prudent to have it, closer to the March, April timeframe in coordination with town elections. Now, the question then comes is that if we're going to put that question on the ballot, should there not be another question, if we have the finiteness of this, is that do you want to approve a district? Now, if you want to approve it, do you want to approve a debt exclusion? And I think those things are mutually inclusive, so that they should be married.
I would agree with you. If I were in your position, if I were in Scott's position, I would want to use the awareness of this district-wide ballot question, and at the same time ask the voters, best way we think we should be paying for this is through a debt exclusion.
Right.
There are some particularities with with the law. So, for instance, my understanding is that it would have to be a separate piece of paper. It couldn't be on the same ballot. But those small mechanics aside, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We have to work collaboratively with our towns to get to the far end of this timeline. So if there is a wisdom to saying we should bump this vote a little bit later, the project team will say, okay, that might adjust some estimates in terms of procurement, but again, we're part of a region. We need to listen to the folks that are going to be putting on. This is a same-day election in all 9 communities, the same polling hours, and so we have no right to declare when or how. So I think that's fair game.
Okay, and the other question, and before I get to the enrollment issue, is that as it relates to the presentation, when it comes down to, I'm not a huge fan of what it costs the average homeowner, because I think people get confused at that. And we went through this, we just approved, as you know, a fire station in DPW, and I was deaf on saying anything about average. I said, no, I want to know, what's it going to cost me? So we ended up putting a tax calculator on the website with a link to the assessors, so I could look up my home. If I didn't know the value, I could look up my home, plug it in, and the calculator would calculate out what the yearly increase would be, the quarterly, and the monthly.
Your fire station model is an excellent one. I've already forwarded that to our project team.
Okay.
And we would intend to do something very similar. We don't want people, again, at this early stage, it's inartful, but it's something.
Right.
But we eventually want to be able to say, if you know this much information, your street address, and you use the database and then plug it back into the calculator, you can get a more precise above or below that average. That would be our intention.
And by the time this vote takes place, I'm assuming your numbers will be finited at that stage of the game?
We would know a project funding agreement as of the October 2024 MSBA board meeting, which means they'd have to signal to us. They wouldn't bring us in front of them if it weren't going to happen. So the exact reimbursement amount, the total project funding agreement, we would have before then. But to say that it's official, that's when it would be.
Okay, so I think then the question becomes for us, if we're going to put this before, put the district agreement, and I get what you're saying, if we're going to put the district agreement before the community at a special town meeting, I think we should really need to know, answers to those questions as it's being presented, so, because those questions are going to get asked.
Absolutely, and I would like to think that if we're if we're submitting if we're at the end of schematic design by August to give the MSBA their required 2-month window for review, I will double check, but I believe that's really the sweet spot of when we should have some reasonably reliable numbers at that
Okay.
point.
And again, I just go over the fact that we had a fire station DPW, it was a hard sell. I mean, the committee came out of it with 58 million, and no secret, I beat everybody over the head to get it down to 38.5, and now we got to make it work. And I say the same thing here, is that people, only because I'm concerned now with people that are on fixed incomes, because I am. And I have said all along that unfortunately, when we do projects in this town in particular, we lose sight of the fact that people are retirees and they don't have the ability to make up that difference. And again, I would say the same to you, which I understand you're well aware of. Now, when it comes to the question of additional communities, Pembroke, Marshfield, as it relates to enrollment in Abington's allotted figure, by including those two communities, what's that do to Abington's?
Great question. I've got a few charts that I can share with the board at another time. My projection is, if I use the world we're in now as a baseline, I would tell you that a school designed for 900 with Marshfield and Pembroke using their current 8th grade enrollment, and that, by the way, is our benchmark. The number of 8th graders determines the initial allotment of seats. I would say we would be level. So in other words, the number of seats that is apportioned to Abington prior to using unused seats from other communities will be roughly in proportion, using just 1 year's worth of data. So a school of 900 without Pembroke, there would be more seats apportioned amongst 9 towns. So I would say in short, it would be in proportion.
Okay, so now, in the proportion, now let's talk reality. When you get down into the Cohassets and what have you, are they utilizing their allotment now?
No. The assumptions that I operate with in my own head are, if towns are going to stay in their lane, it would be the high-demand lane is Abington and Rockland and Whitman, and more often than not, Hanson. That is, those are the children that are likely on a waiting list after we fill our freshman class. And to your point, Cohasset and Norwell have historically been under-enrolled. And so when I look at trends data, that's my assumption, that they would leave seats on the table to then be reapportioned. Hanover and Situate are in between, believe it or not. Historically, they would have been closer to a Cohasset and Norwell, but that's changed. Hanover's enrollment of the school has doubled in 4 years. I was at Situate's Select Board where I told them they've got 54 students in the building. That's the most they've had since 1982. Now, is it a trend? Is it a blip? But I'm operating under the assumption, conservatively, that there'll be seats remaining from Cohasset and Norwell, and perhaps a few from Hanover and Situate. But I would make the assumption that there would continue to be an oversubscribed demand from the other communities. And if you ask about Marshfield, Marshfield is our biggest community. They're apportioned about 33 seats. As of last week, there were 25 students who will be admitted. There's a long time between now and the fall, but I have been using the number 20 in some of my projections. So we need some more enrollment data, but I feel confident that it's not going to drop like a stone to a single digit. So that's with Marshfield factored in. So that right now is, I guess, an early toss-up.
Okay. So at the end of the day, what we're talking about is that you've still got to finite your numbers as it relates to this. You need to get before the
MSBA, yes.
MSBA. And if we're going to look at the district agreement, you're going to address the issue of the debt in an amendment to the district agreement that will be put before us for a fall town meeting. However, from our standpoint, I would suggest that we don't call a special town meeting unless and until we know whether the state is going to approve funding for your,
Certainly. I mean, nothing really exists until we have that, and
Okay.
whenever they schedule their October board meeting, that's what that's when we're on schedule to getting that official.
okay. And then lastly, perhaps, and it's more to the town manager, if we could coordinate with the other town managers and town administrators, as far as the clerks, to come up with a date. I really don't like, to be quite frank with you, the January date. I would prefer much better into the March, April timeframe. So if we could kind of focus on that, see what the other communities are thinking too. I know that's just me,
Yeah,
but.
the clerk's feedback was, stay away from 2024. They
Yeah,
got enough
yeah, oh,
votes.
yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Message
exactly.
received, yes. So, certainly.
Okay, open it up to the board for any questions.
Yeah, you've answered all our questions, Kevin.
I had one, so if the state comes back, is there a certain number that if they're not gonna reimburse this much, the project's off?
No, the expectation is that if we meet their grant milestones and they approve and they are approving the reports along the way, there will be a reimbursement rate. Ultimately, that affects the bottom line for the locals, right, to pay for. But
Right.
our team is making projections based on recent history as to how they've reimbursed in other high schools and other vocational schools. So there would be no compelling reason why it wouldn't move forward. What we're looking to find out, of course, is, let's see that precise reimbursement number. That's really the key. There's such a drop-off between the eligible reimbursement, what's eligible for reimbursement, and that's really the key. If you can keep your costs down in areas that are exceeding the reimbursement cap, the cap per square feet for classrooms or shops, if you can control for instance, the auditorium that we have, I think our designer said, that's actually a little bit smaller than what the MSBA would allow for. And not that but it might be strategic decisions like that to say, okay, we don't need an auditorium that holds the entire school, but we can certainly function with something that's smaller, and let's have the seats be retractable. So there is, through schematic design, really should put it through the ringer and really force us to take a look at some of the assumptions that we've made. Because what we want is, we want that reimbursement share to be as high as possible. In the same breath, I would tell you that I am looking to get into deeper conversations with MSBA about how they calculate reimbursement shares for regional schools. I've read the enabling legislation. I have a question about whether or not we're being labeled as a regional school or as an independent agricultural and technical school. And without getting too far in the weeds, in one definition, they look at where the kids are actually coming from, and they look at the affluence of those communities. And we're a blue-collar school district, and I would hope that the reimbursement rate will reflect that. So my question, and there's no promise other than the promise to do my due diligence to say, explain to me how this is done. Because if you're looking at our 9 communities and you're reimbursing us based on the assumption that all 9 communities are equally represented, which means they would be, in theory, equally paying for it, that's not the case. So I hope to have I'll have news, maybe it'll be good news, and maybe it will impact that reimbursement rate. It'll just take a little while longer.
Has
Yes.
are they going back at it again? or?
I don't think so. They have until April 11th. I read in an article, and you're not allowed to make any, as you would know, you're not allowed to make any changes to the educational plan. So you can Groundhog Day and go back and try again. It's unlikely, which means they would have to be pulled from the grant
From the
program.
list, okay.
Yeah. And that, Mr. Chair, is another downstream conversation about, and if this weren't to happen, our project team is also working on, they've got base estimates, so they're saying to us, if we were just going to bring the existing building up to code, it would be about $110 million. Not a requirement. We're not on the hook. We don't want to put anything out there that suggests that if this isn't supported, that it somehow means we've got to do $110 million. But they do have a responsibility to unpack what that means. So it might be, in my mind, that could be a series of, smaller borrowing measures over a 5 or 10 year period.
Okay.
But we'll focus on Plan A for now, but we do need, we do want to be able to articulate that as well, so people understand that too. But your willingness to give us some time this early in the process, I do appreciate it.
Very good. Mr. Damasio, do you have any questions?
Just a couple of quick ones.
Sure.
Adding the two programs, the plumbing and veterinary science, are those seats in addition to for each town, or will those be added seats on top of what we are allotted now because of new programs?
Those are baked in, those would be baked in, so there'd just be enough space to house those programs with two teachers each.
And then I don't believe you have the agricultural aspect now, but would that open up separate funding or grants because you're going into that realm, or no?
We're always on the lookout for grants, that's for sure, and we have been fortunate with some recent state grants. We did open a horticulture landscape construction program, I think it's in year 7 now, which has been very successful. So I would say we have been successful in getting some state grants, most recently for workforce development grants, actually. But nothing specific. What I see as a value add by adding we could call a second, if you will, Aggie type of program, is that for children in our region who may want this program, it's closer, it's cheaper to administer, it's cheaper for the community, it's part of our local district. So hopefully that will bear fruit.
And then the actual program, is it operating costs? Is it a higher operating cost? Is it going to be higher incurred cost, as this program goes, or is it a high cost program to maintain?
Everything that we're talking about tonight, I would say, has a higher operating cost. I don't have any data as to whether or not the two new programs. I would think that the plumbing program would be similar to our HVAC program or some construction programs in terms of operating supply budget. The veterinary science program would have some initial costs for equipment that would be specialized. But successive administrations have been supportive of skills capital grants, and we've been able to score some considerable funds over the years, which means we're not putting capital into our local assessments. So it would be my hope that prior to fiscal '29, we would be in a position to be able to apply for skills capital grants funded by the state directly. And we've seen this happening at other vocational schools as well, that they're applying, they're opening new programs, or they're expanding existing programs. So that certainly isn't a guarantee, but it's definitely something that will be part of our strategy. And in doing so, we will by not needing to include those additional equipment costs as we're doing cost projections, that certainly would be helpful.
Okay. And yeah, just I want to echo kind of what Kevin said. I'm an advocate for vocational schools, but I do worry about the fixed income residents and other things like that. So I do appreciate, modeling our tax calculator and putting as much information out there as possible to the residents and presenting tonight for us.
Thank you for saying that. This obviously, we have hearts and minds of our district. I really believe that. No one spends 1 second saying that they're ambivalent on the value. Hearts and minds don't always equate to wallets, and that's really what we're working on here. And I do think that expanding our region may be the one, fighting for some more reimbursement money, looking for outside revenue streams, but we know that grant funding is it's sporadic, it's probably better for supplies, there's not something that's sustainable for capital, but I do think that for us to meet the moment for something for the next 50 years, it might be that expanding our region, getting as many partners as we can to share the cost, because that would be the one thing we can control, and we can bring costs down. Amend our regional agreement so that oversubscribed communities are not locked into a rate that could be artificially high for periods of time, as Kevin was saying, with peaks and valleys. It's also peaks and valleys for enrollment. So I think with those factors and with a commitment to being transparent as we go through the next 10 months or so, we'll bring forward the most cost-effective model that we can. This design, there will be no additions. There's, like the designers have said, if this is what you're going to build on this site, this is it for 476 Webster Street. So I think that we're the only regional school district in eastern Massachusetts that has other communities around it that are not affiliated. So the town of Hingham, the town of Hull, the town of Duxbury are also not affiliated. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of energy in this calendar year actively going and recruiting. We're going to respond to where the organic interest comes from. And we will make projections. So I think, Mr. Chair, as part of this fall town meeting that I'm referencing with the regional agreement amendment, I would project that it could also include language regarding the terms and conditions of a new member town. And with that could be a consideration, and I think that also puts even more information in front of voters to say, change the regional agreement, bring another roommate in to help pay the bills, where are you going with this? And it's several months before a vote. So I think we can get some things in alignment that will make sense to town leaders as we go forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Chief Del Papa, if you could, basically, in terms of your budget presentation, I think I'm more looking for the overview, not the, the nitty-gritty. I'm more interested in this, the statistics, where we stand, and in terms of, I know, and again, you were sitting here when you heard the legislators in terms of the local aid, so I think as far as the budget goes, that's something, it'll be a process you and the town manager are going to have to deal with. I think I'm more interested in the overall global picture as far as the operation of the department as it relates to your stats, so go right ahead.
Well, I promise to keep it brief.
Good. Okay.
Ahead of the annual report, what I've handed out is a comparison of the statistics, incident-based reporting statistics between 2022 and 2023. You can see the increases are denoted in green, and the decreases are denoted in red. The overall calls for service increased by just over 4,000 calls for service between 2022 and 2023. That's a 45% increase in the department's calls for service. I just wanted to highlight on there, one of the biggest increases we had last year was thefts from motor vehicles. And I just wanted to highlight for those folks that don't follow us on Facebook, we started a trend called the 9 p.m. routine. If people at 9 p.m. every night just make sure all the valuables are removed from their cars and their cars are locked, the keys are removed, that would help us dramatically cut down on those types of calls. On the back part of those statistics is a citation analysis for those same years, 2022, 2023. You can see we had a 57% increase in motor vehicle enforcement. Those numbers do not include the warnings we gave out for verbal warnings. I'm sure there's an increase in there. I was just unable to provide the stats for you tonight. Regarding the budget, our overview, I was hoping to start a cadet program. We had put that into our budget for next year. It doesn't look like that's in the cards budget-wise this year. It's something we will hope to revisit in the future. With that cut out, we're hoping to level fund our services minus our contractual obligations. Hoping not to have to make any further cuts. We'll see as the process continues. And finally, I know the town manager has been keeping you informed on our deputy chief of police search. We've narrowed it down to a final candidate, hoping to make a formal conditional offer of employment tomorrow, and hopefully I should have a formal announcement for the board in the upcoming weeks.
Okay, I'm assuming backgrounds and so forth have been done?
It'll be after the conditional offer of employment's made, we're going to be doing a full background and then standard psychological medical exam.
Okay, so you're not going to announce anything until the background is completed?
Correct.
Okay, fine. As it relates to, I know my concern, and you and I met in regards to it, with traffic enforcement, how you doing with that in terms of visibility in the community?
Our folks are out there. They're
Okay.
hitting the streets. They're busy with the calls. Like I said, we had over 4,000 calls increase for service between the 2 years. But our folks are out there. They're hitting our problem areas daily. I hear them on the radio, so
Okay.
I think they're having a good impact.
That, good, because that, one of the complaints I received, and that's why I put forward to you, and was the visibility factor, but if they're out there now, and I have been seeing them out there, so I can see that. Questions from the board?
You don't see any cuts coming for this year as far as, like school resource officers, any special programs that you're running now that you'll be having to get rid of?
Hoping not.
Me too, but.
Like I said, the increase we were looking for was primarily for the cadet program. That would help get some of the officers that we have inside working in the station back out on the street. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to make those cuts. But as far as additional cuts, well, we're going to wait and see.
How many offices are you at right now?
The full department's 23 right now.
And what are you budgeted for? How many?
I think we're at, funded is 28.
Mr. Damasio, do you have any questions?
Yes, no comment.
I just see a lot of you, I just want to make the statement that I do see a lot of your officers out on the road, especially on Hancock Street, some of the busier streets that we have here. We've had a lot of complaints in the neighborhood of Hancock Street, so thank you very much to be able to get out there. Right, Scott?
I'll pass that on to the troops, I'm sure they'll appreciate it.
And just lastly, if you could, whenever the decision is made of the background, would you, Scott, it's more for you, would you make sure we're aware of whomever the person is? Any other questions?
Kevin's all set.
You're all set, Kevin?
Yes.
Great, very good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Have a good
Thanks,
night,
Chief.
The Veteran
Thank you.
Service Officer, Adam.
All right, good evening, everyone. I will keep this brief and,
Adam brief or brief?
I will be
I'll settle
brief,
for you,
brief,
though.
But I actually have somebody else who's gonna follow, so I will not be brief.
Fair
I
enough.
lied. We have an exciting announcement. I will hold off on Mr. Partington coming up and doing that. Thanks to everyone who was standing up here earlier, we still have our Saves Fund, our supporting Abington veterans with emergency services. We currently have around $40,000 left. We are accepting grants for up to $1,400 for veterans and widows in Abington that qualify. We're not talking major money. We're talking about $66,000 income if you're a single veteran or a widow, or $75,000 if you are married for income limits. So if you are interested and need support in utilities, transportation, or food, please reach out to our office. Chapter 115, if you are a low-income veteran or widow and you're struggling to get by, Massachusetts also has a Chapter 115 program that helps pay for daily living expenses, housing necessities, and they reimburse all medical expenses to you every single month. Lastly, during our finance meeting, I requested a part-time employee. Clearly, that is not going to happen with all of the cuts. And I do understand that. My biggest need was or is just having somebody staffing in the office. A lot of my job is sitting with clients one-on-one, spending hours going through medical records and documentation. So I truly do need assistance answering phone calls and having people come into the office to help them for those that walk in. What we have been thankfully utilizing is the Veteran Tax Work-Off Program. We've been able to utilize that. We currently have 4 volunteers that are coming in between 2 to 4 hours. They've committed every single week. So they're coming in to staff our office and help out with projects and answer phones we're working on getting and utilizing our volunteers a lot more than we have before. So if you are interested in volunteering for veteran services and looking to use the Veteran Tax Work-Off Program, please reach out. Last but not least, I would love to welcome Travis Partington. He is a Marine Corps, he's a Marine Abington veteran, and he's on the advisory council, and he will probably talk a few minutes longer than I am. Sorry, Tim. About something we have.
No, I don't mind hearing from him, that's fine.
The Abington Veterans Muster. Thanks, Travis.
Good evening. What a pleasure and honor to be in front of you all tonight. My name is Travis Partington. I served in the Marine Corps from 1995 to 1999. I was a radar operator for a surface-to-air missile system called Hawk, made by Raytheon just up the street. So it's kind of funny how that all works out. When you think of muster, and I thought a lot about what we're trying to do with this program, thanks to the Dyer Memorial Library, I learned that Charles F. Allen, a little over 150 years ago, called Abington volunteers to muster at the Old Colony Rail Station the call was made to serve in the Civil War. And Abington volunteers got together and Captain Allen took them to Virginia, which according to what I've learned from the Dyer Library, would make Abington the first to respond to the call for the Civil War from Massachusetts. And so when you think about why we call it the muster, it's not just the noun, the verb, which means to come together. It's to honor the legacy of those who've come before Adam, come before myself, and other veterans here in Abington. We want to make sure at all times we honor those who've come before us, and we stick to our mission focus now, which is bringing Abington veterans together. And not just veterans. It is clear to me from my experience and time here that Abington as a whole supports her veterans. I can tell you with calm assurance that I would not be where I am today if Abington hadn't put her arms around me. I didn't come from Massachusetts. I didn't know how to say Worcester. I got here from Yuma, Arizona, just out of the Marine Corps, and was told to go to Worcester. And I said, well, hey, how do you get to Worcester? Suffice to say, I got an education real quick. But this program is a monthly program for right now, based on people who have served in the military and people who are civilians who support veterans here in Abington, and we have a lot of them. And Adam and I are trying something different. We're the first city, town, municipality in the Commonwealth to make a TV program to connect us and my story and Adam's story and other people's stories with the people in Abington so they know that we're here. And we're hoping that other veterans who are on the fence about becoming involved in their community will say, you know what, I want to join that. I want to become more involved in our community. We've seen it very clearly. When veterans are engaged in the community benefits. So it's just with great anticipation and excitement that I can say, hey, tomorrow at 6 p.m., Xfinity Channel 6, Verizon Channel 28, the first episode will air. And he's really excited, as you can tell. I'm excited too, but in a different way. This really is a very complex story for me, how I got here and why I'm here today and where I came from. Because again, I didn't grow up in Massachusetts. I was one of those who came to this state after my service and had to figure it out. And I can tell you that, again, I wouldn't be here without people like yourself who make sure that veterans in this town are taken care of. And I wouldn't be here without people who are civilians who never served before, making sure Abington takes care of her veterans. So that's what we're trying to do. It's new and different, but we believe it's going to be successful. Any questions from you all? Yes, sir.
No, very good. I appreciate, from our standpoint, your willingness to serve and, to further the issue of the muster. The interesting, you said, from a historical standpoint, Abington has a section of town called the Muster Field, which was the muster point. It was a vacant field. It's now housing, where the troops would muster, and there's a picture floating around that shows when Governor Andrew came down to review the troops in the muster field. And they mustered from there to the train station, which was built in the 1890. Well, the train station, the train tracks were, the train came down in 1845, but the station wasn't built till the 1890s, but they were able to board the train right at that location, so.
I learn something new every day.
There you go. Yeah.
Awesome, and just pure happenstance. Well, again, thank you to the Selectmen and the board for allowing me to speak, and I hope to become a very positive voice for the town of Abington and her veterans. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks very much.
Thanks, good luck with the show.
Next item on the agenda, request to be appointed to the Open Space Committee. Mark Grasser and Joshua Swayze. Are either one of them here? If not,
So there is one
opening.
Joshua Swayze was by this afternoon. He has recently been appointed
To the open space.
to the Recreation.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that has any bearing on your decision.
Okay, so there's one opening.
There's one
Mark-
opening.
Yeah, Mark Grasser is new to town. He has not been on any boards. Joshua Swayze was just appointed to the Open Space Committee, and I into recreation or
Excuse me, he was
conservation?
conservation.
Hey, that's what I
Yeah.
thought. So he's both on conservation and open space. In fairness to somebody new, and they're not on anything, what's the pleasure of the board? I would personally offer it to Mark Grasser only because doesn't have anything and he's brand new, but
Agreed, we want to welcome new people onto the board, so.
any discussion?
No, the more people we get involved, the better.
Yeah.
So I will nominate Mark Grasser.
Motion made for Mark Grasser, is there a second?
I will second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion, if not, Mr. Damasio,
Yes.
Mr. Justburg,
Yes.
Mr. Chapin.
Yes.
I vote yes. Mark Grasser is appointed. The approval of the minutes, January 22nd and February 12th, we can bundle them together if you like. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve both the minutes from January 22nd and February 14th.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Vote by roll call. Mr. Damasio.
Yes.
Mr. Justburg.
Yes.
Mr. Chapin.
Yes.
I vote yes. Refer the proposed zoning articles to the planning board under the statute. It's a technical vote that we have to take. It's really ministerial. It's nothing on the substance of it. The planning board submits us articles, and by the statute, in order for it to be properly reviewed by the Attorney General, the selectmen in turn have to refer it to the planning board. And before you are certain amendments that the planning board will be holding a hearing on March 6th in regards to. What is the pleasure of the board? Motion, is there a motion to refer the matter to the planning board?
I'll make the motion.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second?
Motion made and seconded, any discussion? If not, Mr. Damasio.
Yes.
Mr. Justburg.
Yes.
Mr. Chapin.
Yes.
And I vote yes. The town manager's report.
Just as a notice that the Finance Committee is still looking for one volunteer. If anybody out there is interested, that would be great. Just go on to fill out a talent bank form. We will have our new website, or our new host up, and the new revamped website right after the March 1st. It'll be available, and there will be an app that goes along with it, fondly known as the Green Wave app, that will connect you with, current events, our live feeds and the such. So, we'll get some information out there on social media on downloading that app, but we look forward to getting that out there. Mostly we've been up to the warrant and the budget, so you have a copy of each. We are still at a deficit. The deficit, I think, in the budget that I sent you last week was probably in the range of 1.9 million. Realistically, we're somewhere around 1.2, I believe. We're still working on it. We're still waiting on various numbers to come in. If there was any hope of any further aid coming from the state, well, I don't think that that's a thing anymore, so. So, yeah, we'll keep working on it, I'll keep updating you. It's an ongoing process at this point. It is truly just level service budget, so.
Okay.
That's where we're at.
Very good, thank you. Any questions?
No.
All righty, that being the end, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Motion made, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded, vote. Mr. Damasio.
Yes.
Mr. Justburg.
Yes.
Mr. Chapin.
Yes.
I vote yes, good evening.